You know, there's a curious thing that happens when you wake up. And I don't mean waking up in the morning from sleep. I mean really waking up. Waking up to the nature of reality, to the game that's being played all around you, to the fact that what most people take as solid and serious is actually rather like a stage play where everyone has forgotten their acting. When this happens, something strange occurs. You become lonely. Not just lonely in the sense of being physically alone, though that often happens too, but lonely in a way that cuts much deeper. You become aware that you're standing in a different space from almost everyone around you. And this loneliness, this sense of separation, can feel like a kind of brokenness, as if something in you has been shattered and cannot be put back together. But let me tell you something important right at the start. This brokenness is not what you think it is. The reason spiritually awake people feel lonely and broken is not because something has gone wrong with them. It's because something has gone wonderfully right. The shell has cracked. The cocoon has split open. And what emerges is raw, sensitive, and utterly unable to fit back into the old container. Most people live in what we might call a consensus trance. They've agreed, without ever consciously agreeing, to accept certain stories about reality. They believe that the separate self, this ego, this I that they carry around, is their fundamental identity. They believe that success means accumulating things, approval, status, achievements. They believe that life is a problem to be solved rather than a mystery to be lived. This consensus trance is comfortable in its way. Everyone speaks the same language. When you meet someone at a party and they ask what you do, you can give them your role, your mask, and they understand immediately. Banker, teacher, artist, mother. These labels fit neatly into the boxes of social understanding. But then something happens. Perhaps it's a crisis. Perhaps it's a moment of grace. Perhaps you've simply asked one too many questions and refused to accept the easy answers. Whatever the trigger, you wake up. And in that waking, you see that the emperor has no clothes. You see that all these serious pursuits, all this desperate striving, all this anxiety about being someone and getting somewhere, it's all a magnificent game we've taken far too seriously. When you see this, you can't unsee it. It's like watching a magic trick after someone has explained how it's done. You still see the magician pull the rabbit from the hat, but the wonder has changed. You see the mechanism, you see the illusion, and this is where the loneliness begins. Because now when you go to that party and someone asks what you do, you realize the question itself is part of the game. And if you answer honestly, if you say, well, I am the entire universe, expressing itself at this particular point in space and time, temporarily wearing the costume of a human being, they will back away slowly and find someone else to talk with. So you learn to translate, you learn to speak the language of the consensus trance, even though you no longer believe in it. You become bilingual. And this is exhausting. You are constantly translating between two worlds. The world of appearances and roles and games, and the world you have glimpsed. The world where all of this is seen as a kind of play, a dance of energy that doesn't take itself quite so seriously. But there's a deeper loneliness still. When you wake up, you realize that you are not separate from the universe. You are not a lonely observer trapped inside a bag of skin peering out at a foreign world. You are the universe itself looking out through eyes that call themselves yours. Your body is something the whole cosmos is doing right here and now, like a wave is something the ocean is doing. This sounds beautiful, doesn't it? And it is. But here's the paradox. The moment you realize you are not separate, you also become acutely aware of how deeply most people believe they are separate. And you cannot shake them out of this belief by force. You cannot argue someone into awakening. So you find yourself in this strange position. You see that underneath all the apparent differences, everyone is the same self, the same universal consciousness playing at being individual people. But they don't see it. They genuinely believe they are isolated egos competing for scraps of happiness in an indifferent universe. They wear armor made of achievements and approval. And you who have seen through this, you cannot wear the armor anymore. It feels false. It feels ridiculous. like a grown adult trying to fit back into children's clothing. So you stand there, one protected, and the world feels sharp. This is the brokenness. Not that you are actually broken, but that you have broken out of the shell that once protected you. The shell of the separate ego, the shell of believing that you end at your skin, the shell of thinking that your worth depends on what others think of you. Without that shell, you are raw, sensitive, open. You feel the suffering of others not as something happening to them, but as something happening within the field of consciousness that you are. When someone is cruel, you don't just observe their cruelty from a safe distance. You feel the pain they are in that causes them to lash out. You see the wounded child behind the angry adult. You see the fear behind the arrogance. There's a reason the great spiritual teachers often withdrew to mountains, caves, deserts. Not because they hated humanity, but because the intensity of feeling everything required periods of retreat. They needed to return to the silence, to the source, to the place where the play of forms dissolves back into the formless. But let me be very clear. This loneliness and this brokenness are not problems to be fixed. They are natural consequences of seeing clearly in a world that prefers to sleep. Think of it this way. Imagine you're watching a movie in a theater. Everyone around you is completely absorbed in the story. They're crying when the hero suffers, cheering when the villain is defeated. And then you happen to turn around and see the projector at the back of the theater, the light beam carrying images, the mechanism of the whole thing. You see that it's all just light and shadow dancing on a screen. Now, when you turn back to watch the movie, you can still enjoy it, but you know it's a movie. And when everyone around you is sobbing as if this were the most real and serious thing in the world, you feel a distance. Not because you're cold or unfeeling, but because you're aware of the bigger context. The brokenness comes from the fact that you can no longer relate to life in the old way. You can't get excited about the same things that excite the masses. The new car, the promotion, the social status, all of it feels hollow. Not because there's anything wrong with these things, but because you see them for what they are, temporary appearances in the flow of life. Waves rising and falling in the ocean, and when those around you are still building their entire identity on these temporary things, you cannot join in their excitement. You cannot pretend that these things are the ultimate reality. So you feel broken off from the herd, unable to participate in the collective dream in the same wholehearted way. But here's what you must understand. This brokenness is actually a breaking open. You have not lost something. You have seen through something, and yes, it hurts. Yes, it's lonely. But it's also the beginning of real freedom. Because once you see that the game is a game, you can play it differently. You can engage with life fully, passionately, creatively, but without the desperate clinging, without the fear that if you lose this game, you lose everything. Most people are terrified. They're terrified of death, of failure, of being unloved, of being nobody. And this terror drives them to build fortresses around themselves, to compete ruthlessly, to cling to whatever scraps of security they can find. They're like people drowning, thrashing about, grabbing onto anything and anyone, pulling others down in their panic. But you have had a glimpse of something else. You've seen that you cannot actually drown because you were never separate from the water in the first place. You are the ocean, pretending to be a wave, and waves by their nature rise and fall. This is not a tragedy. This is what waves do. When you know this, really know it in your bones, the terror loses its grip. Not completely, perhaps. You're still human, still subject to fear and pain. But there's a space around it now. And knowing that the fears and pains are also part of the play, part of the dance. You are between worlds, no longer fully able to believe in the consensus trance, but not yet fully established in the awakened state. You're in the gap, and the gap is uncomfortable. What do you do here? What do you do with this loneliness and brokenness? First, understand that you're not alone in your aloneness. Throughout history, the mystics, the sages, the awakened ones have all walked this path. Buddha sat under a tree alone. Christ went into the wilderness alone. Lao Tzu disappeared into the mountains alone. This solitary path is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're walking where the awakened ones have always walked. Second, you must learn to be comfortable with the discomfort. The loneliness is not something to be fixed or escaped. It's something to be felt fully, because in that loneliness you discover something extraordinary. You discover that you are never truly alone. Think about it this way. When you're alone in a room, are you really alone? You are surrounded by the air you breathe, connected to it intimately with every breath. Your body is a colony of billions of cells working together. Your mind is a flow of thoughts and sensations that arise from the entire universe. Where exactly is the separation? The loneliness you feel is the last gasp of the ego, the separate self, realizing that it's losing its grip. The ego feels lonely because it believes it's alone. But you are not the ego. You are that which is aware of the ego. You are the consciousness in which the ego appears, along with loneliness and all other experiences. When you rest in that awareness, the loneliness doesn't necessarily disappear, but it changes character. It becomes less heavy, less solid. It becomes more like weather passing through the sky of your being. And the brokenness, too, can be seen differently. You are broken open, not broken down. Rumi said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you. Your brokenness is your opening. Through the cracks in your ego's armor, life itself can flow in and out more freely. Without those cracks, you would remain sealed in the prison of the separate self. Comfortable, perhaps, but suffocating." Now, I must tell you something else. The loneliness and brokenness of the spiritually awake can become a trap if you're not careful. Because the ego is very clever. It can take even your awakening and turn it into a new form of separation. You can begin to feel special, superior. You can look at the sleeping masses and feel contempt rather than compassion. You can wear your loneliness like a badge of honor, proof that you're more evolved, more awake, more spiritual than those poor unconscious fools. This is spiritual ego. And it's just the old ego wearing new robes. The awakened person does not look down on those who are asleep. The truly awakened person sees that there's no one who is asleep and no one who is awake. There's only consciousness, only awareness, playing all the roles. Playing the sleeper and the awakened one, the confused and the clear. It's all the same self in different costumes. When you see this, the loneliness changes again. Because now you see that even in your apparent separation, you are one with all those who seem separate from you. Your loneliness is their loneliness. Your brokenness is their brokenness, though they may not recognize it yet. And here's the wonderful thing. When you accept this loneliness and brokenness fully, when you stop trying to fix it or escape it, when you allow yourself to feel it completely without resistance, something changes. The pain doesn't necessarily go away, but it becomes bearable, more than bearable. It becomes almost beautiful in its intensity, because it's real, it's authentic, it's life feeling itself fully. Most people are trying so hard not to feel lonely, not to feel broken. They fill their lives with noise, with distractions, with desperate connections that never quite satisfy. They build elaborate structures of belief and achievement to cover over the existential loneliness at the core of the human condition. But you have stopped running. You have let yourself feel what everyone is frantically trying to avoid. And in that feeling, in that willingness to be present with what is, you discover a strange peace. The peace is not the absence of loneliness. It's the peace of no longer fighting with reality. It's the peace of allowing life to be what it is, including the difficult parts. This is what the spiritual path ultimately asks of you. Not that you become some blissed out being floating above the human condition, but that you become fully human, fully present to the whole range of human experience, from the ecstasy to the agony and everything in between. The spiritually awake person is lonely because they see something most people don't see. They're broken because they've broken out of the cage most people still believe is their home. But this loneliness and brokenness are not the end of the story. They're the beginning of a life lived authentically, without pretense, without the desperate need to fit in or be accepted by a world that's still asleep. And slowly, if you're patient, you begin to find others who have walked this path, others who carry the same loneliness, the same brokenness. And when you meet them, there's an instant recognition. You don't need to explain. You don't need to translate. You can speak from the depth and they understand. But even if you walk this path completely alone in terms of human companionship, you are not walking it alone. You are walking with all the great souls who have walked before you. And more than that, you are walking with the totality of existence itself, because you are not separate from it. Your loneliness is the universe being lonely through you. Your brokenness is the universe breaking itself open to new possibilities. So don't curse your loneliness. Don't despair at your brokenness. These are signs that you're on the path, signs that you're waking up, signs that you're becoming real in a world full of people still playing roles. The path of awakening is not easy. It was never meant to be, but it's worth it. Oh, it's worth it beyond measure. Because what you gain is not happiness in the ordinary sense, not comfort or security or approval. What you gain is reality itself. Life as it actually is, not filtered through the distortions of ego and fear. You have stopped rushing. You have let yourself break. You have accepted the loneliness. And in doing so, you have taken the first real steps toward freedom. So if you find yourself lonely tonight, if you find yourself feeling broken and wondering if you've made a terrible mistake by waking up, let me remind you of something. You have not made a mistake. You have made the only choice worth making. You have chosen reality over illusion, truth over comfort, authenticity over approval. And yes, it hurts. Yes, it's lonely. Yes, you feel broken. But you are alive. Really alive. And that is what you came here for. Not to sleepwalk through a comfortable dream, but to feel it all, to see it all, to be it all. You are the universe waking up to itself. And sometimes that waking up is uncomfortable. The sleeper doesn't want to leave the dream. But you have left. You have opened your eyes. And you can never go back to sleep completely. So be lonely if you must. Be broken if that's what you feel. But know that in your loneliness and brokenness, you are more whole, more real, more alive than you have ever been. This is the gift and the curse of spiritual awakening. You lose your comfortable illusions, but you gain something infinitely more valuable. You gain yourself, your real self. The self that was there before you were born and will be there after you die. Welcome to the path. Welcome to the loneliness. Welcome to the brokenness. Welcome home.